First of all, did you go?
I did, and I was friends with Tex and Diane, though Tex much closer friend and much longer friend. And I had conversed with Jay and expressed my sympathies to, I know them to be more than coworkers, I mean, they're family,
right, about
the loss of Diane, and we had several conversations leading into, and so he emailed me the evite to attend the service.
Okay. And can you share with the jury, how would you characterize your relationship with Diane McIver?
I met her first professionally. Tex asked me to go to talk to Mr. Corey and the company regarding some litigation they had ongoing for several years with the city of Atlanta regarding their Corey Airport Services bidding for and during the Durstran transparency, the big interior billboards that you see at the airport that you're going down the escalator or on the concourses for that work. They later won that litigation in a large decision. I'm remembering $6 million, but I don't remember exactly. During the ongoing litigation, which was in federal court, several different law firms represented U.S. Enterprises and Corey Airport Services, and there was an ongoing need to keep that case in the public eye. So we were invited to go talk to Mr. Corey and to present the firm then was GCI Group, a national firm that I worked with, later CSI Crane. But we went for a lunch meeting, and the conference room at Corey Enterprises is a long table, and as I entered the room with Tex, a very elegant lady was at the far end with a large brimmed hat on, making a kind of, I wouldn't say a show, but it was Chick-fil-A, but it wasn't spread like any Chick-fil-A I'd ever seen before. It was laid out more like a grand tailgate maybe at the Derby. And initially, my impression was that this woman was Mr. Corey's assistant. That didn't last very long, because as everyone filtered into the room, including Mr. Corey, the person, Diane McIver, sits down at the end of the table, and it wasn't McIver yet, but she sits down at the end of the table and pretty much ran the meeting. She handed Mr. Corey the carrot raisin salad, which is, I think, a favorite of his, and kind of it was all set up family style, not the little boxes and not the little bags. And then we basically proceeded to break bread and speak business. We were not hired for the assignment, but it was a very cordial meeting that Diane ran, and that was the first time I met her.
Okay. Now, can you tell the jury, when you arrived at the memorial service there at Corey, did you see the defendant?
Not when I first got there, but I saw him later.
Okay. And can you share with the jury what, if anything, occurred between you and the defendant at the memorial service at Corey?
There were multiple speakers that were speaking at a celebration of Diane McIver's life. It was a very cordial atmosphere. Jay Grover did an excellent job putting the event together. Mr. Corey was the last of the speakers. During that part of the program, I did not run into Mr. McIver. He arrived later. When Tex got there, he told me that he needed to speak to me, then. And this was the first time I'd seen him in person since the night of the shooting. So I agreed. We went back into a conference room next to Mr. Grover's offices, and Tex kind of, I wouldn't say collapsed, but sort of slumped into the chair. He looked very fatigued, and obviously he'd been under a lot of stress. And the gist of the conversation was, I need you to fall on your sword. I need you to take back what you said regarding Black Lives Matter. I need you to help me make this go away, or come up with a strategy as a PR person to make this go away. Now, I've known him a long time. We're good friends. We would have lunch together every 2 or 3 months. When he made this request of me, as I'd already said no multiple times, he could not look me in the eye. Before this happened, the week before, when Danny Carter was unable to come to Mr. Maple's offices.
Your Honor, excuse me, this is beyond the scope of the question.
Sorry.
You don't need to apologize. I would ask that the question be, just answer the question instead of a long narrative response that I can't even figure out if there's going to be an objection somewhere because I can't tell what we're answering.
Okay. So, Mr. Rucker, You are appropriately asking open-ended questions. If you want to insert yourself a little bit more after you feel like the question has been answered, if it's not eliciting an objection for you interrupting the witness, let's try that for a little while, just to try to keep some contours around it.
Okay.
All right?
Okay. Yes, sir, I understand. And Mr. Crane, you understand? Right?
Yeah, I'll be briefer.
Okay. When you say to the jury that the defendant could not look you in the eye, tell me what you mean.
During the request to my face, I need you to do this, the messaging had evolved to, I didn't say it. And what I was trying to refer to, not trying to go off point, was in the interim week between October the 5th and this event, which I think was the 14th, but I don't have my calendar with me. In the news media coverage, which I have, the story had started to be Mr. Crane, me, was mistaken, and changes in the account started to appear in print, basically saying that I was wrong or mistaken or had misstated things. And then by the time of the event, the celebration, Tex was saying, I didn't say it. But when he was telling me I didn't say it, he couldn't make eye contact.
And so the way you kind of dropped your head just a second ago
was essentially what it like. I'm trying to stay in front of the microphone, and
right.
I didn't say it. I need you to fall on your sword. I need you to help me take those words back, take them out.
Okay. And can you tell the jurors what was your response?
You did say it. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that it's caused so much misery. I'm sorry that it's really... I was very clear then and multiple times since. There are challenges with the night, the case. I don't think this is one of the bigger ones. I did point out, Mr. Samuel, if this is a continuation of the same thought, that...
Anticipating objections.
that there were things Mr. McIver had said to me in those early accounts that were inaccurate, that he knew were inaccurate, but that he told me...
I'm serious. Hey, we can laugh at this because there's no question on the table dealing with earlier accounts. The question was, what did he say at the memorial service? It's the only question that was asked.
Okay. There was a question on the table, you're right, and witnesses are allowed to take a breath before they continue on, but we do seem to have pivoted away a little bit from talking about what was going on in that conference room at the Corey offices.
Right. Okay. I'll circle back, but let's complete our discussion with respect to the memorial service.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, can you tell the jurors, were those two statements the only couple of statements? He said something to you and then you said something back to him, or did the conversation continue?
The conversation continued.
And can you share with the jurors the remainder of the conversation?
I reminded Tex that he told me in the initial conversations, and when I pressed him because I was going to be dealing with reporters, I knew that they were going to be asking me if he or Diane had been drinking. No, absolutely not. I reminded him later that he knew that he had alcohol and that Diane had consumed alcohol. I know that I'm not an expert on who had how much or anything like that, but that they had consumed alcohol. And so I pointed out to him I'd already damaged myself by relaying something that wasn't true.
And so during this meeting at the memorial service, you reminded him that that he had told you when asked he had not been drinking.
And Diane had not been drinking, that is correct.
What else happened during that conversation?
He didn't really respond to that other than head down again. I made clear that I still wanted to help him, which I did and I do, that I didn't think he was being all that well served by his current legal counsel, that I understood if he had to cut ties with me because of the Black Lives Matter comment, and that I understood if he didn't want to use my services anymore because I wasn't charging him, I was fine with that. But that if I could be of further assistance, I would be. But I was not willing to lie about what he said to me. And I also felt it would not be helpful to his case if I was willing to lie to do that.
Now, can you tell the jurors, have we kind of, in that testimony there, have we kind of covered what you were about to discuss prior to Mr. Samuels raising an objection where you referred to an earlier account?
Yes.
Okay. So let me ask you this. If we fast forward, that's October, so did you see Mr. McIver at any other time for the remainder of the month of October?
No, I did not.
Okay. How about any phone conversations?
Typically, from that event until our luncheon in December of the same year, the pattern would go like this. I would receive a phone call from my uncle, Rick Sowers, or a text from my uncle, Rick Sowers, and he would say,
Hold on one second. Let me direct you that way.
I understand. I know where you're okay.
Okay, so hold on one second. Your uncle's name is what?
Rick Sowers, S-A-U-E-R-S, and he is a 40-plus year client of Fisher and Phillips and Tex McIver.
Spell Mr. Sowers' last name.
S-A-U-E-R-S, like the spice company, though we don't own that. It would be nice if we did.
Okay. You would receive phone calls from your uncle Rick Sowers in this period of time after you would have had this conversation in the conference room with the defendant.
That is correct.
And, don't tell us what your uncle said to you, but as a result of what he said to you, say in this first phone conversation, what did you say back to him?
I'll call him.
Okay.
Him wasn't Rick. I'll call Tex, but I said, I'll call him.
Okay. And can you tell the jury, did you call him?
Yes.
Okay. And can you tell the jury, did you actually talk to him?
Yes.
And what was the nature of the conversation?
More than once, additional requests to recant to the news media, specifically to the news outlets that I'd spoken to, the references to Black Lives Matter's protesters being one of the reasons Tex was concerned for his safety, the driver, Danny Carter, and his wife, Diane McIver's safety on the night of September the 25th.
Okay. Now, can you tell the jury, did the defendant ever make a request of you during these multiple conversations about saying something different regarding the gun going off as a result of the vehicle hitting a bump?
The bump, someone else did.
Okay. Now, can you tell the jury, as a result of the requests that were made of you by the defendant to retract or take back the statement, Black Lives Matter, did you at any time ever do that?
I did not. To this day, I have not.
Now, you referenced a meeting that you may have had with the defendant. Do you recall what date that was?
December, the luncheon?
Yes.
Believe it was the 19th of December, prior to Christmas of 2016, a lunch meeting at a favorite restaurant of both of ours called Roasters on Lenox Road near the condominium where Tex and Diane lived. that we had lunch at before, that he asked me to lunch.
Okay. I'm going to show you a photograph. Your Honor, for the record, that is State's Exhibit 513. Do you recognize it? Do you identify State's 513?
Me?
Yes, you.
I do, and I can recommend to the jury they got great turkey, by the way.
Okay. And what is State's Exhibit 513?
It is a photograph of the front of Roasters, the restaurant, and we ate on that patio that you can see in the right side of the photograph.
Okay. I will tender State's 513 in the evidence, Judge.
Any objection to the photo of Roasters? Admitted. Bless you.
God bless you.
And if you touch the screen pretty hard, it'll make a mark. Can you show the jurors where, if you can, on this photograph, you would have had lunch with the defendant in December?
There's a way you go in here, and then you go back out on the patio, and we were the second booth back from the entrance to the patio on the left.
Okay. Now, was this the first time that you had actually seen the defendant since the memorial service at Corey?
Yes.
And can you tell the jury what occurred there at the meeting?
We had lunch. I asked him how he was physically doing, because I knew he was losing weight and grieving. We talked about the auction and some other things we had talked about in some of those interim conversations back and forth. And as we kind of got closer to finishing our food, Tex again asked me, but again couldn't make eye contact, about taking back the Black Lives Matters comment without boring the jury. I said the same thing I've already said to you guys, I think 3 times, to Tex. And then he got a phone call from Fulton County Judge Craig Schwall letting him know that...
Actually, get into the content.
Okay, sorry.
The phone call wasn't placed on speaker or anything, right?
No, it was not.
Okay. But after the defendant received the phone call, did you have a conversation with him?
We did.
And was the nature of your conversation with him regarding the phone call he just received?
It was.
Okay. Now, was there anyone else present at this luncheon?
The waiter, but nobody else at the table.
Okay. And can you tell the jury how long did the lunch last?
Because of what I think you're about to ask me about, it lasted longer than it probably would have, but it was about a 90-minute closing on 2 hours lunch because of what happened.
Okay. Now, can you tell the jury what did the defendant tell you, if anything, after the phone call with someone?
Well, I was able to hear his side of the conversation because he's literally sitting on the other side of me. So he's saying, "Thanks, Judge Schwall, you, sir," and asking questions back. And then he hangs up and looks very sad and tells me that he's been informed that the Atlanta Police Department was swearing out warrants, and then he lists the charges to me. And then he said he needed to call Steve Maples, his attorney, and he did. And then it wasn't on speaker, but he was holding the phone a little further away, so I actually was able to hear, and I won't relay most of both sides of that conversation. But again, the gist was, you're going to be indicted. There will be warrants, but the warrants are being issued. And then after that phone call was completed and he hung up, I said, "Let's go turn yourself in today." Avoiding news media attention and coverage, and gave some other counsel, because part of the luncheon conversation was about his separation agreement with his law firm.
Okay. And so, can you tell the jury during that luncheon, what counsel did you give the defendant regarding his separation from his law firm?
Call Roger Quillen, who was the senior partner of the firm now, before the indictment is public information and known, before the warrants are on the street, accept the severance package, and retire. And he did do that in front of me.
Okay. Now, I want to make sure we're just clear about something, because a couple times you have used the word indictment.
Sorry, I meant, you're correct. I meant warrants.
Okay,
And, sorry.
that's okay. Now, can you tell the jury, did you provide the defendant with any counsel with respect to the auctions or the estate sales that one had already occurred and one was upcoming?
Yes, I
did you
did.
provide them with any counsel about that?
Yes, I did.
Can you tell the jury, what did you tell them?
That it looked horrible, that it was making him appear guilty, that it was making him appear like a vulture, that if any of this moved forward in a criminal proceeding, women in particular were going to be very unforgiving, that I didn't understand the rush, and that I strongly counseled.
I don't know why his advice is relevant to me.
Let's focus on what Mr. McIver
Sure.
may have said or
Sure.
done in connection with that.
Sure. As a result of the advice you gave him, what did Mr. McIver, the defendant, say to you?
I'm the trustee of Diane's estate. She's made multiple bequests in her will, the total of which was around $350,000. I'm, as an officer of the court, compelled to pay those bequests as soon as possible. My estate and my finances aren't that liquid, so to be able to fulfill those bequests, I need to have the estate sale and the auction, and that the contract that he'd already signed with the auction house did not allow him to dictate date, price, etc.
Okay. I'm going to fast forward you just a bit, and I'm going to ask, do you recall actually having an opportunity to meet with me in the spring of the next year, 2017?
You and your investigator at the time met with me in my firm's offices in Decatur.
Okay. And at that time, can you tell the jurors, did I ask you whether or not the defendant ever demonstrated for you the way he was holding the gun at the time in which he claimed the vehicle hit a bump and it went off?
You did, and I said it was more of an explanation. But in the back seat, I'm going to have to lean away from the microphone for this for a moment. He was slumped.
Hold on 1 second, let me see.
Before we go any further with this, are you acting out what you claim Mr. McIver shared with you in word form?
Correct.
All right, then you don't need to act anything out. You can share with the jury what you recall Mr. McIver telling you.
Yep.
If you are trying to reenact something Mr. McIver actually demonstrated to you, then we can.
And that's where I was going next.
Okay.
Yeah, to clarify that. Now, let me just make sure, Mr. Crane, we understand. Did he actually show you himself?
He did not.
He did not. He described for you.
In some detail, yes.
Okay. Could you just tell the jurors what details did he give you about the manner in which he was holding the gun at the time that the vehicle hit a bump and it went off?
After he had asked for the handgun, he laid the gun kind of on his lap against his abdomen. And he was laying down, because he had been sleeping earlier, kind of in a semi-prone position, which I was trying to demonstrate to you, and was in a kind of a semi-conscious sleeping state when he heard the sound and hit the bump and the gun discharged.
Let me show you the exhibit. State's exhibit number 518. You recognize it when you identify State's 518?
This is a record of phone conversations between myself and Tex McIver between the 27th of September of 2016 and October the 7th of 2016.
Okay. And can you tell the jury, during that time period, how many different phones did you have?
2 mobiles, which I have today, and then a landline home phone and a landline office phone. The landline office phone would not show up here. I can bore you with why, but I don't think it's relevant. But the home phone and the 2 mobiles do.
Okay. And can you tell the jurors, do you recognize that exhibit to be the phone records that you have testified to here this afternoon regarding communications back and forth between yourself and the defendant?
I do.
Okay. I would tender states 518, Judge.
Any objection to 518? No. Submitted.
And very quickly, Mr. Crane, if you could, would you just call out the last 4 digits of the numbers related to you on that exhibit and indicate whether or not they are a mobile phone or a landline phone?
6071.
Hold on a second. Is that a mobile?
That is a BlackBerry mobile. Yeah, it still works. Someone asked me today if it came out of the Smithsonian.
Second one?
My home number, 6988, which is a landline.
6988.
And then my second mobile, which are the later calls, 5609. And I also recognize Mr. McIver's mobile number, which is not any of those 3.
And what are the last 4 digits you got?
8137.
And can you tell the jury, based on your 30-year relationship with Mr. McIver, do you know, only answer this if you know, whether or not he is familiar with the Midtown area here in the city of Atlanta?
His law offices in the more recent years are located there. I was involved when the law firm moved in helping move out some of the stuff at the Buckhead offices. He lived in Buckhead still, but the law offices, I think, 6 or 7 years in Midtown, but he was more a creature, if you will, of Buckhead and downtown than he was Midtown.
Okay. Do you know whether or not he would make visits to the Capitol?
For state election board meetings and some other business. And when he and I had lunch, besides Roasters, he liked a restaurant next door to 999 Peachtree, and we ate there a lot in Midtown.
And I want to ask you another question. Can you tell the jury, after the incident and the vehicle involved was in the custody of law enforcement officials, do you know whether or not Mr. McIver was able to buy another vehicle?
He told me I didn't see the second vehicle, but Tex told
What did he tell you?
that he purchased another Ford Expedition, and then I came to understand through other sources.
Let's not get into what other sources.
Okay.
Okay. But that's what he told you?
Yes.
Did he tell you what color it was?
White.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Crane. I believe that's all my questions, Judge.
All right.
Let's stand. He always has one more once I stand up.
So stand up so we can get that out of the system. All right.
Hello, Mr. Samuel.
Hello, Mr. Crane.
Thank you.
Mr. Crane, you and I met out in the hallway, I think, and we've had several phone call conversations over the past
We have.
months. Is that correct?
And I have a lot of respect for you and your legal career.
Well, I didn't ask that, so
Okay, sorry.
Let's stick with what I ask, and
All right, I'll try.
You can say it.
I'll try.
What the heck?
Have a hard time objecting to that one, I would think.
The last time I argued alone.
I understand.
All right. You are not a lawyer.
I am not a lawyer, nor do I play one on television.
And you were not, I know you weren't hired, you were not paid money to provide the service that you provided, but your understanding of what you were asked to do had nothing to do with being a lawyer.
That is correct.
You were not asked at any time to go talk to the detectives or the police on behalf of Tex McIver, correct?
That is correct.
You were never asked to, on behalf of Tex McIver, back in September of 2016 or October, to go meet with Clint Rucker,
I was not. That is correct.
Paul Howard, the district
That is
attorney,
correct.
or any of the other people here, if they were even working here there in 2016, or any member of the DA's office.
That is all correct.
Okay. you had nothing to do with the prosecutors, in other words, correct?
Nor APD, again, correct.
Nor were you ever asked to go testify at the grand jury back in, September or October by Mr. Maples, Mr. Hill, the former lawyers, or Mr. McIver. Correct?
That is correct.
Nothing that you did had anything to do with talking to police, the district attorney's office, or a court. Correct?
That is correct.
Your job was to deal with the press.
That is correct.
That's what you are an expert in.
I'll accept your opinion.
Okay, well, we've been complimenting each other.
Thank you.
And you give advice to other on how to deal with the press
Yes, I do.
and how to deal with crises, correct?
Yes, I have.
But you would never say, I'm going to go represent you in court.
I could not and would not.
I'm never going to go talk to a judge on your behalf.
I would recommend against that.
And certainly in this case, as we've said.
I did not and I would
It
not.
had nothing to do with courts, police, or DAs.
That is correct.
Advice you were giving.
There was no direction or request for, I'm not volunteering, I'm answering, related to law enforcement of any kind.
And when you had these conversations with Mr. McIver in the latter part of September and October, including at Corey, including at Roasters, including the many, many phone calls, he never asked you to lie to the police.
That is correct.
He never asked you to lie to anybody in the DA's office.
That is correct.
He never asked you to lie to the court.
That is correct.
And if the DA had said that, Paul Howard had said that to someone, that you were asked to lie to the police, the DA, or the court, that would be untrue, wouldn't it?
Well, I'm going to check, Judge.
I have a basis for the question.
Well, so him commenting on the veracity of someone else, call that person and explore their statement. Okay?
Did Mr. McIver ever tell you that the gun was fired in a bathroom while he was cleaning the gun?
He did not.
Did he ever tell you that he was alone in the car when Diane McIver, when the gun was fired?
He did not.
When, as you understand, because you gave a fairly detailed recitation of what Mr. McIver told you happened that night, they were coming on I-20, correct? Coming from...
Westbound on I-20 from Putnam County and Rockdale County towards Atlanta, getting onto the downtown connector going north.
Right. So they're coming from the east, the Athens side.
Heading west.
Coming towards Atlanta.
Correct.
And rather than going to Six Flags and heading out west.
Yeah, they turned to get on the downtown connector.
Get on the downtown connector, now you're heading north, correct?
That is correct.
And they didn't get very far before they realized they'd hit, it was a Sunday night and Atlanta was having one of its weekly construction sessions, correct?
No one has ever told me why the traffic was all backed up, but everyone has told me that it was a parking lot. And I won't specify because it'd be hearsay of who everyone is. But
And so they got off at the exit ramp at Edgewood, correct?
as it was originally described to me, he didn't know that, but later he acknowledged it was Edgewood, and it was the first exit available to get off the downtown connector.
And they get to the bottom of the ramp, correct?
Correct.
And then there's some confusion about which way they go, correct? There's some, you don't know exactly left, right.
Tex said they turned the wrong direction.
And there were, according to what Tex said, many people were milling around, correct?
Yes.
And he was concerned about the safety of Diane McIver and Daniel Joe Carter, who were the two people in the front seat, correct?
Yes.
And he said he didn't know who all these people were milling around were, correct?
Correct.
And you described...
As he just... Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes.
You described what the scene in general is like downtown Atlanta with homeless people near the homeless shelter, correct?
That is correct.
People are milling around the streets, there's a lot of drinking going on, especially at night, after nightfall, correct?
I would surmise, but I don't know that. But I would surmise. That would be my guess.
nobody at that time, your understanding is that nobody said anything about Black Lives Matter as they got off the interstate, correct? Tex didn't say that to anybody.
It is not my understanding that Tex spoke aloud to Diane or to Ms. Carter any rationale for asking for the gun.
Right. So the phrase Black Lives Matter is not mentioned, as far as you know, on the night of September 25th, 2016, right?
I would say that's correct.
Okay. As far as you know, the first time that even comes up is Wednesday, or whatever night it is that you talk to Tex, the 27th, is that right?
Yes, and I'm admittedly a little foggy on which of the conversations that it first came up, but it was spoken more than once. Yes.
But it's several days later, okay? At least two.
At least
days
two.
later.
At least two.
He's trying to explain to you why he thought he needed to have a gun in his lap, correct?
Yes, correct.
That's not an event that happened, that conversation on the 25th. It's
His recollection to me, yes.
as to what was going on in his head, as
Yes.
opposed to what actually happened, correct? The statement was not made the night of the 25th. He is recalling what was going on in his head, correct?
That is correct.
And he said, I was concerned because of the people that were around, homeless people. Maybe they were carjackers. I didn't know who they all were. Maybe they were Black Lives Matter protesters, right?
Correct.
He was completely speculating
Correct.
as to who these people were. One thing, though, we know from what he said was he was scared. That's what he
Yes,
said.
and I think justifiably concerned.
And so he wasn't telling you that there was a Black Lives Matter protest.
No, he did not.
He's telling you, I don't know who these people were.
That is correct.
And Black Lives Matter comes up because you knew, as you just told Mr. Rucker, there were protests that summer dealing with Black Lives Matter.
That is correct.
There was a protest 48 hours earlier in Buckhead at Lenox Mall that literally shut down the mall, didn't they?
Yes.
Shut down the parking lots.
That is correct.
They were nonviolent.
Correct, and no arrests.
Okay. But there was
Turmoil.
turmoil, chaos, whatever, right?
Correct.
But it was peaceful in Atlanta, right?
I wasn't there, but it's my understanding, and from the news coverage, it didn't break on beyond that. It got loud, but that's all that happened.
And there were articles in the AJC just 48 hours earlier about the protests at Lenox Mall. Yes?
Yes, and it's even more recent than that because the stories appear the day after, not the day of. So yes, in the AJC and in broadcast media.
And in broadcast media. And not only were there protests in Buckhead and maybe on the interstate in Atlanta also, but also in Charlotte, North Carolina.
That is correct.
And there it had turned violent, correct?
That is correct. A state emergency was declared. 2 civilians got into it. 1 was killed.
And again, Tex McIver on the 27th or the 28th is trying to tell you why it was that he was scared, whether it was a good basis or a bad basis. He's telling you,
His friend, yep.
his friend, why he was scared that night, right?
Yeah, we men don't like to be admitting that we're scared in general.
The Black Lives Matter protest, by the way, when he said that to you, did you think, oh, that's a terribly racist thing to say?
No, and I still don't. I mean, I realize a lot of people think I'm crazy for not seeing it that way, but I didn't then and I don't now.
The protests, have you looked back at some of the TV?
Yes.
The protests are, for lack of a better description, fully integrated, huh?
They are.
Okay. Black Lives Matter protests are not protests that are, limited to African Americans, right?
That's correct.
And in fact, he didn't even tell you at the Edgewood exit ramp what the race of the people were.
He never made any reference to anyone's race specifically.
At all.
Not once.
Either a pejorative term or a non-pejorative.
That is correct.
He just said, I was worried about the safety of the 2 women in the front seat.
And himself,
And
yes.
himself. When you agreed to become his spokesman, he asked you to be his spokesman, to help him, right?
I volunteered and he accepted and then thanked me, yes.
There was nothing about that arrangement or that agreement that included a request that at any time you would lie to anybody. correct?
Those words were never used once, and he never asked me to directly or specifically lie.
I'm talking about, we'll move on.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm just trying to do shortcutting, but I'll stop and let you ask.
That's okay.
Sorry.
I appreciate it.
Okay.
As does everybody, but I'm talking about when you were first agreed to do it. He
did not.
say, I need someone to lie for me. That,
He did not.
Not even close, right?
No, or later. No.
Okay. And what happens is you find out, what you've actually already found out from the Fulton County Daily Report, and don't worry about hearsay unless you get an objection. You were told by Jonathan Bringle. You were told.
Speak for me now?
I am. You were told by Jonathan Bringle, whether it's true or not, that there'd been a shooting and someone was dead.
Objection, Judge.
It's not for the truth of the matter.
It's not relevant.
It is. It explains why he calls Mr. McIver.
That it's just not relevant if it's not offered for the
It
truth.
can
That's
be.
exactly right.
It can be. If it explains why he calls Mr. McIver, we need to understand, why are you calling Mr.
I think
McIver?
that's a better question.
Why did you call Mr. McIver? You were told something.
I was
correct?
told Tex was dead.
And you were trying to find out if that was true, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Obviously, it wasn't.
I was relieved that it was not true.
But that's, the newspapers were all confused, right?
The news initial coverage was very scant and not detailed. Correct.
And that was the afternoon of the 26th, the night of the 26th.
Correct.
Jonathan Ringle is the,
Editor of the Fulton Daily Report.
you know, everybody in the front of this courtroom knows the Fulton County Daily Report is what lawyers read, right? That's our daily read, right?
That's your Bible.
That's our, well, it's not the Bible, but it's certainly the newspaper we all read every day,
Okay.
right? And so that prompts the first call to find out what's going on. And you can figure out already, because you're an expert, that the newspapers aren't getting things right. I mean, they're so far.
They're incorrect, as was a lot of social media speculation.
But even on day one, they don't even have the right person who's dead, correct?
They never printed that Tex was dead, but they printed very weird information about Diane's death.
Okay. You then have a conversation with Meredith Hobbs and Mr. Schneider, right? So those are the two outlets that you're going to deal with directly.
Yes.
You don't deal with the London Times,
I never talked to anyone.
Washington Post, New
No.
York Times,
No.
Toronto.
No.
Okay. The judge doesn't like me to ask lots of questions. If the answer is nobody, then the end, I don't have to recite everybody in the world. But
I've got the book if you want to read through it.
they shared it with me earlier.
Thank you.
So the statement you tell the Fulton County Daily Report and the statement you tell the Atlanta Journal-Constitution is essentially what's in the newspaper, other than the mistake that the Fulton County Daily Report made about the 911. Correct?
That is correct.
And they both mentioned Black Lives Matter, right?
Because I said it, but yes.
And when you said it, because you're a professional, you didn't think there was anything wrong with that. It was just explaining what's going through someone's head as to why he was scared, right?
And I would not have said it if I had known it was going to be intentionally harmful to his case or to the defendant.
Because you're an expert. You get paid, usually.
I didn't want to hurt him, so I wouldn't have said it, but it didn't.
Can you finish?
Well, Mr. Samuel actually didn't get a chance to finish, so you finish your question.
That's okay.
And then
The point is that you're a PR specialist, so you would, if someone said, let's portray it this way, you say, nah, that's no good. That's not the way we need to portray it. But he wasn't reciting a fact. He was reciting to you a state of mind he had, what he was thinking, as opposed to anything that was actually going on.
That is correct, in my opinion, yes.
And when you reported that, when you repeated that to the newspaper, you didn't think there was anything bad about that at all. It was a perfectly legitimate reason to be scared, correct?
And in the story, yes, and in the stories I read to you and the jury and everyone else, it was a very minor aspect of the initial coverage.
But it went viral, didn't it?
It certainly did.
It went ballistic, didn't it?
It exploded, and as I understand from other I can't say that. Good Morning America showed up on my parents' front yard looking for me, and I don't live there.
And now, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so in a way, in my 30-plus years of doing this, it was very unusual.
And now we find out that it's become a racial story, correct?
It did become a racial story.
And now it's in the Tokyo newspaper. Now it's in the Toronto newspaper. Now it's in the Washington.
The Mauritian moon, yes, yes, and yes.
Every
It was.
continent on earth is now writing newspaper stories about this racial incident in Atlanta, Georgia.
I didn't see anything in the Antarctica press, but I'm pretty sure everywhere else.
And it was all because of what you said. Correct?
It was my remarks taken out of context.
Completely out of context.
Yes, that is correct.
Completely being spun the wrong way.
That is correct.
It's like reading an Onion article. You know what the Onion is?
It was very, I don't know if everybody over here is, but it was very similar to like an alternate world version of what I had said and what had been said to me.
You might as well be watching Saturday Night Live newscasts.
It wasn't that funny, but I understand the analogy.
There was nothing accurate about what was going on in the newspapers in September, October as it dealt with the supposed racial connotation of all this, was there?
The reporting that continued by the AJC in the Fulton Daily Report I thought was pretty fair and responsible, but the outer market, national attention remained skewed and very focused on what they perceived to be a racial element in the story.
Are you aware of the book written by the famous author Tom Wolfe called Bonfire of the Vanities?
Yes, and several news outlets made that comparison that this was basically ripped from the pages of Bonfire of the Vanities, the storyline.
And in 10 words or less, what's that famous novel about?
Objection, Judge.
Well, you just said it's in the newspapers. That's what people were comparing it to. That's what is going on in the press that ultimately we're having to deal with.
Okay, but who cares what the book is about? What does that have? What we're dealing with is what's in the press, not what Tom Wolfe wrote in a fiction book years before.
The newspapers were using the book as a model and explaining it, just like Bonfire of the Vanities, just like that fiction book, we now have.
Okay, but none of that's in evidence. The newspaper.
He's testifying. He's testifying to that. That's what the evidence is.
All right, next question. We don't even get into what Bonfire of the Vanities was about.
Did you expect this kind of viral, hysterical, if that's a fair word, response to what you had said?
No, I did not.
But you can't put the genie back in the bottle, can you?
That is correct.
Those are the words you used.
Yes, they are, and
Those
have
are the
more than
words
one.
those are the words that Tex McIver had said to you when he's trying to remember what was his thought process, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And the misinterpretation was caused by our, should we say, friends in the media, right?
I have many, not the ones who did this, but yes.
And the impact was not only in the newspaper, but with his law firm.
Yes, his law firm and his legal counsel.
And I want to focus on the law firm first.
Which-
They started saying, you need to get out of you need to stop using our law firm on your letterhead. We don't want anything to do with you, Mr. Crane, right?
They did.
Because they blamed you for some of this, right?
Well, as testified in this courtroom, they still believe that I somehow called a press conference globally and put all this out there. Yes, that is correct.
And you told Mr. Rucker in the same interview you described previously that, I'm trying to get the words right here, the impact of these words that you used in the newspaper was that the public wanted him beheaded, castrated, and shot.
That was some of the feedback in social media. That is correct.
I'm talking about Mr. McIver.
That Mr. McIver, because of the facts as presented in some of the news media coverage, that he should be basically killed.
Because of the Black Lives Matter.
Because of the Black Lives Matter and the racial elements of the story.
To repeat, there was
Black
nothing.
Lives Matter and
Because of the Black Lives Matter reference and the racial elements of the story, people were essentially saying things like off with his head, cut his nutsack, pardon me, ladies, in social media, not in the news media. And it was getting louder, if you will. If you've ever been in a political conversation on Facebook, it gets out of hand. It was that times 10, times 10, times 10.
Was there anything in his statement to you that prompted the reporting in the newspaper that you interpreted as being racist at all?
No.
You began your direct examination by saying that in your conversation with him when you first called him, and he answered the phone, that he was very distraught, correct?
That is correct.
You'd known him for 30 years. You could tell by his tone of voice that he was distraught.
He cried. I could tell from the sobbing in his voice.
He was upset when he talked to you.
Not the entire time, but a good part of it.
He had not been sleeping.
He said he hadn't had hardly any sleep in a couple of days.
In fact, he'd been up all night at the hospital. You were that.
Yes. Well, I wasn't at the time, but I was later.
And I made a note to myself here, but you already said that the newspapers got the 911 call inaccurate.
That was inaccurate.
He told you in reciting what happened when they got to the bottom of the Edgewood ramp, he didn't know what was going on, but he was afraid.
That is correct.
I guess it goes without saying, but he's not blaming Black Lives Matter protesters for the death of Diane McIver, is he?
He did not. He has not, and I don't think he does.
Or even implied that anyway. But
No, that would be like the book.
Huh?
No, that would be like the book.
But we're not talking about.
But the book that we're not talking about. Sorry.
So over the course of, I gather, many weeks or months, and I lost track of each of the individual incidents, he's asking you to retract him because of
The fallout.
the fallout, the unintended fallout,
The consequences of those words.
the mistaken fallout, the mistaken spin that was being put on it by the sensational journalism, correct?
Correct.
That's what he's trying to get you to help him with, right? Let's tell the newspapers that you said it, you made it up, your fault. Let's tell the newspapers I didn't say it, whatever.
Correct.
I'm the one who's being told I should be beheaded and castrated and shot and
More,
other
yes.
words you used because of the sensationalism in the newspaper, correct?
Yes, and the perception that that entailed.
He is not telling you to go lie to the police.
He did not.
He's not telling you to lie to the DA.
He did not.
And he's not telling you
I'm
to
not
lie to
going to
the
object
court.
because we have certainly been
And that's your
at
last question, okay, but that is 86th or 7th time we've gone through the triumvirate. We have a brief redirect. We're going to have to end pretty close to 5. It'd be great to finish with Mr. Grant, but I don't want to constrain you.
Right.
Would you like to try?
Yeah? let's
Okay.
try.
Okay, let's see what we can do.
All right.
Did the defendant tell you how many people he saw underneath the underpass when they got off the expressway?
Not a specific number, no.
Okay. And did he tell you whether or not any of those people had signs or anything like that, like traditionally we see with protesters?
He did not.
Now, he did not say the word to you, I want you to lie. He never said that word, right?
He did not.
What did he ask you to do?
Take it back, fall on your sword, take responsibility and say you said it,
Right,
say that you were mistaken, that I didn't say it.
right. Was that the truth?
That was not the truth.
So was that a lie?
If I had done it, it would have been a lie.
Right. And let me ask you this. The lie was to the media, is that correct?
That is correct.
Now, Mr. Sam, you went through this long list of newspapers and media outlets all the way to Tokyo, and all over the world that were covering this case, is that correct?
That is correct.
Objection leading.
Would that also include,
Can I ask him to not lead the witness?
Yeah, no, I think you just did, and if he does it again, then I'll sustain it.
would that also include, like, people who read the newspaper?
Well, obviously, when you attempt, in my profession, to influence coverage, you are attempting to influence perception.
Right. That would include police officers, right?
I can't speak to his intent. I can speak to understanding media relations, and you do try to control stories.
And the people who read stories include police officers, right?
Yes.
Prosecutors?
Yes.
Did he tell you that he was no longer a partner at Fisher and Phillips at the time that he shot his wife?
He did not.
Did he tell you that his salary had been reduced to significantly?
Quite the opposite.
Explain that to the jurors.
Particularly after, but also before, Tex had a number of other business interests, kaolin mine, a cattle business, and he would talk about their success and his wealth. And during and after the aftermath of the shooting, he would speak to his wealth compared to Mrs. McIver's wealth as being roughly twice her net worth, income roughly twice her income. And the only thing that was odd about it was never anything that I asked about or brought up, but he would offer it.
Did he tell you that there were plans already in place that he would no longer be with the firm in his capacity as a partner or a salaried attorney?
I'm not sure how this has anything to do with costs. I didn't ask anything about his partnership status at Fisher and Phillips at all.
No,
What's the connection?
connection is this. On cross-examination, he did ask him, hey, you were getting all this pushback from your firm. And the pushback from the firm was because of what had been printed in the newspaper. So what I'm asking is, when he's telling you he's getting this pushback, did you also hear from him that there were plans that the firm was going to let him go?
He's asked the question, I objected to it once. Allow him to repeat it again, it doesn't accomplish anything. The relationship, whether he was a partner or not, because there's already been testimony that he was a partner still, all that has nothing to do with the one question I asked, which was, did the Black Lives Matter comment lead to acrimony with the law firm?
Okay, no, I appreciate that, and there is evidence in the record that actually answers your questions. Whether this gentleman knew it or not, I don't think it's germane to what you're exploring with him. So let's get to a different area.
Okay. All right. Did in any of the times that you had a chance to speak with the defendant, did he ever say to you why he did not identify the driver as Danny Carter?
He did not.
Did he ever say anything to you that he had about him asking her to tell people that she had not been in the vehicle at the time of the shooting?
He did do that subsequent to the initial round of coverage, and it was part of our many phone and text conversations between October the 5th, when Danny did not come to Mr. Maple's office, and later.
What did he say to you?
That he had told Danny in the hospital that no one knew that she had driven them there, and that he did not want her to be involved in all of this, and that she could go or she could stay and then just tell people that she was there because she was a friend of the family.
He told you that?
Yes, he did.
The defendant sitting right over there. He told you.
Objection, Your Honor. I'm not allowed to ask 3 times the same question. He should not be, especially on redirect.
Okay, fair point.
Thank you, Judge. I hope I covered it in a short amount of time. That's all my questions.
Are there questions from the jurors? If so, if you would pass them down and to the left, please. If you felt that your words made on behalf of Mr. McIver about the Black Lives Matter concern were taken out of context, can you explain to the jurors why you didn't do a retraction or at least a statement clarifying the situation?
The request came several days after the initial round of stories. You typically need to contact a news media outlet if you have a problem with a story within about a 48-hour news cycle.
When you say the request from...
If I were to attempt to make a request to any of the outlets anywhere in the world, and of course I don't have all of their contact information, they didn't speak to me, nor did Mr. McIver authorize me to speak to those other outlets. You have to have permission, one, from the client, which I didn't have, nor direction from initially, and then in a timely fashion, and I could, but won't bore them with lots of instances of getting retractions, corrections, clarifications, and amplifications, but I didn't have the request, the permission, nor the timeline. By the time I was getting direction that needed to come out, the stories had been in the public record. They were a Friday story in most cases, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, about Wednesday when I really started getting pushback. And by that time, you're almost a week from the original publication date. No news media outlet's going to, one, take you seriously, or two, unless you can factually disprove something, take it back or clarify or rewrite the story. Most of the outlets moved on. A handful, including some represented in the courtroom here today, continued to cover the case.
You talked about trying to reach Mr. McIver the evening that you were sharing the statement with Ms. Hobbs at the Daily Report and maybe Mr. Snyder with HAC. You can get us straight on the timeline, but that you've had trouble contacting Mr. McIver. Is what you shared with Ms. Hobbs what you shared with Ms. Hobbs and Mr. Snyder cleared with Mr. McIver before it was released?
We didn't have a draft statement we were working from, and again, it's one of those areas in judgment, trying to help the friend. I was trying to correct the record before the next day's print hard copy of the HAC and full Daily Report. So I had vetted with Tex on the phone what he was concerned about in their earlier versions of the stories that were already online. He had told me what he was wanting corrected. I had contacted him back, letting him know that both outlets had agreed on those areas of focus to make the corrections and that they wanted me to serve as spokesperson. It was 10:30, 11-ish. He was taking some sleeping medication and he went to sleep. When I agreed to Meredith Hobbs first to be quoted and then Craig Schneider second to be quoted, I did make the judgment call in that I'd been told I could relay the information, and be the quoted source. We agreed on the information, that part had been vetted. I didn't have that opportunity again that night before he went to sleep to say, are you okay with them attributing it to me because they're not talking to you? Then the next morning when I called them, sent them the links, read the stories, that was clear and there were no issues raised, nor in the immediate subsequent days, because again it was going into a weekend.
Okay. During part of your testimony, you say that you mentioned to Mr. McIver, and we're now at the point where he's asking you to retract or amend. If you change the story, then what you have is a fear of homeless people, which historically wouldn't be a problem in Atlanta. You recall saying something to that effect to Mr. McIver.
In the meeting during the celebration of life, when I was being asked again, I was trying to help him understand why that, in my opinion, professionally would not help him.
Okay. When you said that to Mr. McIver, did he say to you or confirm in any way, well, that's okay because I was scared of the homeless people as well. It doesn't matter if we pull out that other piece, that still explains my situation.
Not at that meeting. At earlier times, which you didn't ask me about, he did say they could have just been homeless people that I was scared of, and that there were people that he thought more than once were sort of moving in the direction of the car.
Okay. Can you tell the jurors why it was you called the sheriff of Putnam County on or around September 26th of 2016?
I don't know if they've heard from, is it not hearsay? That
Just want to know why you called him.
they are friends. Tex and Diane hosted several events for Sheriff Sills and the entire department at their home. A few months before all this happened, I contacted Jay Grover at Corey because there'd been a pro-law enforcement billboard about Blue Lives Matter 2 that had been, the Corey companies had donated the space, and that Tex and Diane had paid for some of the artwork and such to be created. So I knew that there was a very strong, and the Georgia Sheriff's Association, then and now is a client of mine. Howard Sill was on their board of directors. So knowing of that relationship and him being the sheriff in the county where they lived at the farm is why I reached out to Sheriff Sill.
Did you ever ask Ms. Carter, Danny Carter,
I did.
About what happened that night?
There was a Christmas party in December prior to the luncheon with Mr. McIver. I believe it was the first week of December and the weekend of the FCC Championship in 2016 at Jake Rover's home, which is on the Corey property. And Danny and I had a chance to sit down in a little fire pit in the back, and she gave me kind of her detailed accounting of what happened that day and evening.
Did you ever reach out to either Schneider or Hobbs in an effort to correct what you call the factual errors, the 911 call or the Peachtree and Pine intersection? I
did, and it's sort of a bone of contention that Craig and I still have. We're friends. He claims that I'm unclear on that, and the audio recording of that phone conversation, he's never played it for me. But he did make other corrections that I asked for in the story prior to the one that appeared at 7:49 on the 30th that I read to you earlier. Meredith, I think I just said it's not a major point, but I do want you to know they said, Tex said to me that they didn't call, they being the driver and Tex, because of the time it would take if they stopped for an ambulance to reach them and move Diana out of the car into an ambulance. They thought that was greater than the time it would take to get to a hospital, and I did relay that.
Okay. Mr. Rucker, any follow-up with Mr. Crane?
Those two news articles that you read for the jurors, with the exception of the factual inaccuracies, is what was written in the article, is that what you told the reporters?
It is. It's an accurate reflection of our conversations, and there are a lot of things they asked me about that they didn't put in the stories, but yes.
Okay. And when, in the various conversations with the defendant, did he say to you, just say that he didn't say it, meaning the Black Lives Matter comment?
Yes, he did.
And is that a true statement?
No, that is not.
Thank you.
Mr. Samuel, anything else? All right. Mr. Crane, thank you for your time.
Thanks, Jane. I think it's cool that you do that.
Okay. Noted. Mr. Rucker, can you count on one hand the number of witnesses remaining in the state's case in chief?
I absolutely can.
There's an update for you folks. I want you to get out of here. You stayed a little late, and I appreciate that. That was only because we were so close to wrapping up with that witness. But fly like the wind to where you need to go. 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. We'll pick back up with the state's presentation of the case. Don't talk about the case tonight. No outside research. Avoid the media, etc. It was great seeing you again. Juror 61.
How many hands can he count on? One or two?
We're talking one hand.
Okay.
All right? Let's see you by 9 o'clock tomorrow.
All right.
Since you raised your hand.